For coming. Let me tell you a little bit about our speaker tonight. Matt Trotta is Buzzfeed's Vice President of Sales. Since joining Buzzfeed in 2011, he's partnered with Fortune 100 brands to create great shareable content online. Matt started in the branded content space while working for Federated Media as one of the original members of the New York team. Prior to his 4 years at Federated, he worked at Turner Broadcasting in various digital roles in research and sales. Matt currently sits on the advisory board of Jetty Productions, a video production studio. A graduate of Syracuse University, Matt lives in Bedford, New York with his wife Heather and one-year-old son Benjamin. Please join me in welcoming, all the way from Fifth Avenue in New York City, Matt Trotta.
Thank you. All set? Can you guys hear me okay? Yes? Turn it up. How's that? Nope. I can talk loud if you'd like. Okay. Wardrobe. How's that? Okay. How's that? All right, I'm going to start. Ooh, there it is. Great. Well, thank you all for having me. This is an awesome place to be. I'm really excited. Special thanks to Christian and Whitney for setting this all up. So thank you guys very much. When you have the opportunity to speak with a group like this, you always ask people for advice. Like, what do you do? How do you quickly captivate a room? And so I went to my boss, Jonah Peretti. I'm like, so how do I do what you do? And he's like, you need to quickly establish credibility. That's kind of hard for me when I can barely see over the podium, right? It's not going to be my physical presence. So I thought I would have somebody else come up and do it for me. Unfortunately, the person I wanted to come couldn't be here, but I do have a little clip that we can share from him.
The problem is that the media landscape is changing so rapidly. You can't keep up with it. I remember when Buzzfeed was just something I did in college around 2 a.m.
There's really three things that we now know to be true. And I don't mean to beat this over our heads. It's this idea that mobile is the future. You read it on TechCrunch,
You read it on every site out there. But it's always good to kind of take that step back. And to me, the most fascinating experiment is what's going on in the supermarket, right? And you probably all see it, right? When you're shopping and maybe you're in the produce section, you're just looking at this cardboard display selling Cosmopolitan magazines next to watermelons. You're like, what is that doing there, right? Or maybe you're at the deli counter and you're finding that there's a display trying to sell you Trident gum. And that's actually there for a reason. It's pretty interesting. It's that single copy magazine sales are down 8% year over year. Gum sales are down year over year. And the reason, right, what they're attributing this to, it's the checkout line. There's no more impulse purchases. Like 3 items or less, or 10 items or less, you could always be relied on. Like, well, I guess I need Altoids for the car. But that's no longer the case, right? When we're bored in line, we're not looking around, we're picking up our phone. And I'd like to think that we're all on email and we're texting each other, but really we're on our social feeds, right? We're looking at Facebook, we're looking at Twitter. And that is such an important thing to think about. From where we sit at Buzzfeed, we know that social is mobile. Has anybody in this room not been to Buzzfeed? Okay, so you're all very unproductive people. We are a great time suck. The easiest way to think about Buzzfeed, it's a news and entertainment site. Last month, we had over 100 million people visit the site. And we find that people are coming there for 2 reasons. They want to see what's hot on the web, and more importantly, they're coming to Buzzfeed because they're looking to find content to share. So two things sort of happen to our traffic, right? The first is at any given time, between 40 and 60% of BuzzFeed's traffic are people coming to particular post pages because they saw it in their friend's Facebook or Twitter feed. But the more staggering fact for us, and the one that keeps us thinking, the one that keeps us going, is that over 50% of our traffic is now from mobile. And that number keeps growing and growing and growing. And so what that means is, when BuzzFeed launched a couple of years ago, we could put up a piece of content on the web, we could put up a video, and it would spread and it would be shared and things would be okay, even if it wasn't optimized for mobile. But what we see now is that if you're not optimizing anything you create off the bat to be viewed and shared on your mobile device, you're really not giving it a chance to spread and to be out there. The last thing that we know to be true, or rather that I know to be true, is that animals have become the new leisure section. This to me is the fun one. And it's a pretty interesting backstory to look at. There's a former New York Times editor-in-chief, a gentleman by the name of A.M. Rosenthal. And if you Google him, look him up on Wikipedia, lived a really fascinating life. But I guess as the editor-in-chief of the New York Times, one thing is always consistent. People are telling you your business is going to die, right? Back in the 60s and 70s, they luckily were not blaming it on the internet. They were blaming it on cable news. So with circulation down, A.M. Rosenthal did something rather interesting. He took the New York Times, which at that point was just only two sections, the New York Times and then the sports section, and he started to look at other people's interests and introduced the lifestyle section, the home section, the garden section, the science section, right? And obviously circulation went up because this has now become an industry standard. But what's interesting about that is it hasn't evolved over time, right? Think of the millennial generation. Think of somebody like myself. I pick up the New York Times every Sunday morning into the bottom of my driveway. I'm from New York. And the real estate section shows that some dude sold his house for $32 million. I like it, but I can't relate to that, right? That's not the right audience. What I relate to are the things that I grew up with, right? I relate to internet memes. I relate to cat content. I relate to animal content. So from BuzzFeed's standpoint, we're not creating cat content because we are infatuated with it and because we love it. We're creating it because we know this is what our readers want to see, and this is what our readers care about. And I think in this day, right, where we are so connected with each other on an emotional level, what we share really says more about who we are than our actual profile page. I'll give you an example of what we think is social content. Basset hounds. They're cute, they're funny, they're running. What's interesting about that is if we put basset hounds running into a post, in a couple days it'll get 2 million views and it'll take off, right? But when you think about it, there's very few people that wake up in the morning and be like, I need to search for basset hounds, especially basset hounds running. But it's a type of content we share. And so the way marketers and the way brands approach content, it's fundamentally different than the way you thought about search, right? Social is a different way to look at things. And at BuzzFeed, we've been doing this for quite some time. So wanted to share a little bit about what we see in terms of what people want to share, right? Because again, it's not about what we want to talk about, it's about what our readers want to consume. We know people want to be inspired. There's a story a couple months back, it was pretty incredible. There's a gentleman, little boy, his name was Miles, he's in remission, and his dream was to be Batman, right? So the Make-A-Wish Foundation teamed up with the city of San Francisco to help make this come true. And it wasn't that they just gave him a puzzle and said, go solve it. They got thousands of people involved, right? And this little boy was running around the city, running around San Francisco. He was solving crime. He was saving damsels in distress. And he was being rewarded by the mayor. Thanks for saving us. It kind of makes, for me, it still makes my arm hair stand up, right? inspire people when you create content. Like it's the type of thing somebody wants to share, and it's tapping into that emotion. I think that's always the big takeaway for us, right? Any type of social content always taps into an emotion. Does anybody know what's wrong with this picture? You can shout it out if you want. Okay. If you're left-handed, everything. Right. People want to share things that they can relate to. And if you think about, like, how many people in this room are left-handed? Okay. If you were to write something on your Facebook wall complaining about being left-handed, like, would your buddies call you a wimp? Right? Maybe something a little bit worse, right? So what we find is that when you create content for small niche communities, content allows them to discuss things that they wouldn't normally talk about. It allows you to relate with friends. It allows you to relate with people you know. In fact, we at Buzzfeed have been taking things a step further, and you're starting to see this in a lot of our quizzes. You know, anybody not see a Buzzfeed quiz lately? Yeah, they're everywhere. We've figured it out a little bit, but we've been doing quizzes for over 2 or 3 years. And what we found is that when we first started doing quizzes, it was more about, can you give somebody a right answer or can you give somebody a wrong answer? But that's not what somebody wanted to share, right? The way we've been approaching quizzes now is that, you know, it's more about, can we help people find a way to tell them who they are, right? It's not how smart are you about Harry Potter, it's which Harry Potter character are you? Are you a Muggle? Should you be in Gryffindor? Right? And so it comes back to this idea that, you know, if you create content that's geared for small niche communities, it will be shared. Humor, of course. Nobody thinks less of you if you make somebody laugh. Right? This printer is now called Bob Marley because it's always jamming. And nostalgia. This to me is always interesting because I think of nostalgia, I think of growing up in the 80s, I always think of Saved by the Bell, right? And then a couple months back, I saw a post take off, and it was, you know, you graduated high school in 2006. To me, that didn't align, but you know, if you think about it, you graduated high school in 2006, you've gone through college, you're in the workforce right now. This is a great piece of content that you can use to relate to your friends. And we know that that content's going to find its audience because if it's getting shared, it's not getting shared by me. I didn't relate to it. It's getting shared by the people it was intended to. You know, the class of '06. And of course, animals. We won't get into the animals anymore. But what we find, though, is that there's definitely an art and a science to creating shareable content. So let's geek out a little bit. This is a dashboard, right? We have a real-time analytics tool at Buzzfeed.com. Anybody can go and access it, and I can always show you how. But this helps us understand how content is moving. So what you see here, right? You're seeing blue, you're seeing red. Whatever post this is attached to, we have 81,000 views. Of those 81,000, 60,000 is blue. Those people came directly to Buzzfeed.com and found a piece of content. The red, 21,000. Those are people who came to this particular piece of content because they found it in their friend's Facebook feed, social feed, whatever it might be, and that brought them in. So what we're starting to realize is that as you see different types of content, you know, go off and find its audience, that content behaves differently on social platforms, right? If something takes off in Twitter, you know, think about it, like the way you consume content on Twitter, 24, 48 hours, it's done. Right? Facebook is a little bit longer, and even something like Pinterest, which we're continually, you know, looking at and just an on, is continuing to grow and continuing to drive traffic. And so we take this knowledge, and you know, we have machines because everybody has machines, and we use that to predict what's going to take off and what's not going to take off, and understand decay rates. You know, when has a piece of content reached its saturation point? When is there a little bit more life to go? Is this helpful for everyone in the room? All right, so let's do something a little different. Let's actually look at what's going on right now. There she is. Buzzfeed. This is the dashboard. This is Buzzfeed in the past 48 hours. Anybody can go and access this. This is not proprietary data. In the past 48 hours, 59 million people have visited BuzzFeed. Of those 59 million, 33 million, which is the blue, those are people who came because they're our readers and we love each and every one of them. The red, 27 million, those are the people that came to BuzzFeed because they found it in their friend's feed, right? And it's always interesting, at least if I can give you one thing that you can take away, is this is what's hot right now. If you want to go back to your desk and tweet something out, you'll definitely be one of the first. 77 facts that sounds like huge lies, but are actually completely true. In fact, here it is. It's a list post. We do list posts really well. One of the things we found about creating a list post is it's just really easy to share, right? It's easy to pass around the web. But more importantly, it's about understanding how this content is going to live, how this content is going to spread. So 77 facts that sounds like huge lies but are completely true. This post hasn't been up for more than 24 hours yet. It has over 2.6 million views. Of those 2.6 million views, 2.2 million of those are coming in from social feeds. Does anyone want to guess what the primary traffic driver is here? You can shout it out. I'll just keep asking questions to myself, don't worry. It's Facebook, right? 1.7 million of those views are coming in from Facebook. It makes a lot of sense, right? 77 facts that sound like huge lies but are completely true is probably not something you're going to share with your colleagues on LinkedIn. Maybe on Twitter, but most definitely on Facebook, because that's where your friends and your family are. But what's really interesting is to see how content behaves differently across various social platforms. So when you have a political post, Labor brings its frustrations to Charlotte. We won't get into the piece of content itself, but just to give you a sense, it's a little bit more long form. It behaves much differently. If you think of that last dashboard that we saw, right? It was growing, it was launched within 24 hours, it was up and to the right. I mean, this, and we'll dig in even further, this was done fast. It peaked within a day, and it flatlined, meaning the conversation saw it took it, and it moved on. And the number one reason is Drudge Report, Twitter, right? When you think about how political content, how more serious news travels, it's fundamentally different than how something like a celebrity content or how strange facts that you wouldn't know would travel. And as brand marketers, it's how do we take this knowledge and how do we apply it to our own way of thinking? There's one other trend that I kind of want to show you. I think it's really interesting to me. Not so much that I'm going to share it, but it's just interesting. 29 hairstyling hacks every girl should know. Obviously not geared towards me. My hair has not moved in years. But you can get the sense by looking at this who this is intended for and what the audience is. But what's more interesting is to see what happens to this piece of content. It was launched the first week in November, and at the end of the month, in December, it's still up and to the right. Right, if you remember, we just looked at this political post and it flatlined after a couple hours, and the things we now know to be true is up and to the right, and it'll die out in a little bit. But this post continually grew over time, right? And the number one reason, because of Pinterest. So it's about how can we understand how content moves around the web, and then how can we harness those knowledges, and then from the brand perspective, right? How can we help bring those to brands so that you can create your own shareable content? Is this helpful? Okay, there are a lot of nods, so we're going to continue to jump around some more. Let's get back to our machines. It's not new, right? Content marketing has been around for a very, very long time, but it's different because you can now have a conversation with people as opposed to just talking at them. And we take this into account when we have our Buzzfeed business model. This is the quick sales pitch. We don't serve banner ads. Everything we do is about working with brands to help them create and distribute shareable content. And we believe everything we say, right? Whenever we create a piece of content on behalf of a brand, We want to make sure that it's optimized and that it can work right off the bat in mobile. Otherwise, it has no chance of being spread, right? Otherwise, it has no chance of truly taking off. So I thought it would be fun to actually start to look at some examples of how different brands are doing it. And there are many more in the browser loaded, so by all means, fire away questions. I like Toyota. I like Prius. They've been doing a good job of this. Toyota Prius is it's a great car. It's a fuel-efficient car. They're going after a younger audience, right? They're going after urban environments. And what they want to do is they want to talk to people of, like, you need a car in the city, or if you're going to have a car, have one that's very fuel efficient. So at Buzzfeed, it's about how can we not just create posts that says this is fuel efficient, this isn't, this isn't, this isn't. It's more about how can we tap into that brand attribution and find a way to create content that people will want to share. So 20 best passive-aggressive parking notes. Thanks for always parking across the path. Gives me the chance to be a movie star and slide across your hood now and then. Try it, it's awesome. But with Toyota, it's not just about putting one piece of content out into the wild and hoping it takes off. It's about trying a lot of different things, right? So to have a passive-aggressive parking note alongside the 20 most scenic drives in America. And what's interesting about the 20 most scenic drives in America, every image in that list are drives that have an extremely long distance between gas stations, right? It's a nice way to call out the car is fuel efficient without beating it over the head. Or a brand like GE, right? I don't think I'm ever going to be the guy that has the $32 million beach house or the guy that's going to buy an airplane engine over the internet. But I still think of GE as an innovative company, right? Because they're continually to create content in their voice, life-changing ways to make your day more efficient. There's a lot of different ways that brands have gone about and created shareable content. And again, it comes back to that dashboard, right? So the way we talk to brands and the way we help people think about it, it's this idea of a social lift. So you see that 1.3 at the top. It means that for every piece of content that we create, success is getting a 1.3. Success means for every 10 paid engagement, can you get an additional 3 through earned channels? And what's fascinating about that is if you think back to those editorial learnings, those earned channels are going to differ brand by brand by brand. If you're creating content and you're a beauty brand and it's geared to a very particular audience, you're going to see traffic come in from Facebook and maybe Pinterest and maybe things like Makeup Alley, versus if you're selling razors and it's Gillette, then you might see Facebook, Tumblr, you might even see crack.com. So it's a larger idea of just, can you create something that somebody not only wants to read, but wants to take it a step further? Can you create a piece of content that somebody wants to share? I'll give you a fun example to look at. Virgin Mobile. Everybody knows Virgin, right? Because they know Richard Branson. Nobody really knows Virgin Mobile. They're burners. And in the marketplace, they're outspent by the AT&Ts and by the Sprints and by the T-Mobiles of the world. But Virgin Mobile knows that its audience is young, its audience is in the 18 to 24 segment. So we work with Virgin to create a newsroom to help them respond to content where it makes sense for their brand. Remember Rich Kids of Instagram from last summer? For those of you who haven't seen Rich Kids of Instagram, it took off last summer, and it was a Tumblr feed. And it was a little bit obnoxious. Well, actually, it was really obnoxious, right? Somebody was going out there and finding all the pictures of rich kids doing strange and kooky things on Instagram. Me and my boys on my daddy's private plane. And they're 16 years old. Showboating Cartier watches. In this case, here's somebody who is about to get on his own private plane, standing in front of his Mercedes. If you're Virgin Mobile and your audience is 18 to 24 and you're selling prepaid phones, Rich Kids of Instagram is not your target, right? But the people talking about it are. So how do you react? Well, you react in your own voice. The middle class kids of Instagram. Baller status, whips, Applebee's, killer parties. It doesn't make sense for every brand to be reacting to something like Rich Kids of Instagram, but it's about knowing what your brand voice is and knowing where it makes sense for you to react. Another example would be, going back to the beauty business, if you're in high-end cosmetics and WhatsApp just gets bought for billions and billions of dollars, that's where you want to react, right? You're doing a post on $10 billion looks to complete your day. It's about finding what your voice is and where it makes sense for your brand to be. But you can't always rely on that, right? You can't sit there and wait and hope that Rich Kids of Instagram happens so you can have your shiny moment. It's about creating a balance, right? The idea of timely content, also with evergreen content. Virgin Mobile, 10 movie plots that would have completely changed if they had cell phones. Goonies, Google Maps, movie over. Here's another example, and I want to preface this that I'm allowed to share the Virgin Mobile analytics for a reason. Miley. We love Miley. Last September was probably the first of many, many Miley experiences. In this case, it was at the VMAs when she really showed her true colors. So Virgin Mobile, makes sense. They want to react, and they go out there and they create a post, 13 celebrities posing with the old versions of themselves. And they lead with Miley Cyrus. Right? There's old Miley and there's new Miley. But what's interesting is the learning, right? So we have that dashboard, and we know that 1.3 means a successful piece of content. In this case, it got a 1.6, which means for every 10 paid engagements, they saw an additional 6 come in through earned channels. And that popped immediately. So if you're Virgin Mobile, how can you take that? And how can you learn from that? And how can you take that out more? Well, for them, they did. And they launched with 16 video game characters posing with the old versions of themselves. Mario and Mario. Never a piece of content that they would have thought about. Yes, the video game audience is out there and it was always on their peripheral, but without the learning on what worked, they never would have taken this approach. And for them, they're in a newsroom setting. They're constantly creating content. They're constantly thinking about who their audience is and what does their audience want to share. And they're learning and they're trying new things. And, for them, it gets better and better. Things are always up and to the right. Obviously, we wouldn't talk about it if they're not up and to the right. But more importantly, it's what they're doing with that. So, again, Virgin Mobile, they're in this position where they're outspent by AT&T and T-Mobile. It's no secret. So instead of doing what everybody else is doing and going out there and buying these audiences, they're letting the Buzzfeed content, they're letting that Virgin Mobile newsroom go out and find its audience. They're tagging that, and then they're retargeting that audience later on down the web with banner ads. And that's how they're moving product. There's a great article in the Harvard Business Review written by the CMO, Ron Ferris, on how this has become a very efficient way for him to find an audience, speak to an audience, and sell his product. One of the things that we see across the board is that, when you create things that people want to share and that people want to get behind, they think better of you. We've always run a lot of third-party studies where we see that there will be a lift between somebody who saw your branded content as a result of seeing it on Buzzfeed versus somebody who saw your branded content as a result of seeing it in their friend's Facebook channel. And that's where it goes through the roof, right? It's this word-of-mouth marketing. So the key takeaway is, it's an art and a science. It's not just about putting up a piece of cat content and hoping it takes off, because you're not going to know what spreads, right? It's about experimenting. It's about having fun. It's about trying different things. So since quizzes are so popular, I thought I might end with a little bit of fun. Who said it best, SpongeBob or Nietzsche? How can I compete with geniusness? Who thinks SpongeBob? Okay. Who thinks Nietzsche? SpongeBob. They call you heartless, but you have a heart, and I love you for being ashamed to show it. SpongeBob? Nietzsche? You're right. And the final one, panic is your enemy. You are strong. Through your strength, you shall overcome. SpongeBob? Yeah. Nietzsche? We have a lot of fans. Thank you again for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Anyone have any questions for Matt? Come on.
Yes.
I saw most of those, to be honest.
Thank you.
I saw the older, younger posing one, and I didn't realize that Virgin Mobile had sponsored it, and I don't know if I scrolled down far enough to even see the ad. So I'm just wondering, like, what are the metrics that they're getting from this, or how are they monetizing? What kind of click-throughs are you seeing?
Yeah, it really comes down to what a brand's KPI is, right? In Virgin Mobile's case, it was all about establishing relevancy with a very young and active social audience. But that's not the case for every brand that's probably represented here in this room. So it's about figuring out, what's important to you. Is it perception? Is it awareness? Is it moving product? Is it, getting video views? In fact, I'm going to make this a little bit of a long-winded answer for you, just to show you some. Can we pop that back up? Thank you. Show you a couple of examples, right? So Pampers, moms. Pampers is a great product. They're trying to speak to young moms, and more importantly, they want to celebrate three things, right? There are three things that babies do really well. They love, they sleep, and they play. And Pampers came out with this beautiful video around it, and they wanted to get it shared, and they wanted to get their initiative known. So we worked with Pampers and created content like 11 babies who played so much they tuckered out. Wherever feels right, baby girl. And at the bottom of the post, we also embed their brand video, because that's what is important to them. Sometimes it's, and maybe this isn't the right audience, but we're going to have some fun. Sometimes it's about product attribution, kind of like Toyota Prius, right? We're going to stick within the Virgin family. We're going to look at Virgin America. Has anybody flown Virgin America before? It's a party. Like, you get in there and it's purple lights, and then you sit in the seat, and if it's 8 in the morning, you hate yourself, but if it's 7 at night, like, you're super excited. And one of the cool things about Virgin America is that they have this in-screen seat-to-seat chat, right, where you can actually talk to people you've never met before, like, oh, hey, you up to 2B, nice to meet you. That's a great attribution. So they asked Buzzfeed, how do we continue? Like, how do we take this and create shareable content around it? So we helped them create 10 airplane seat-to-seat chat pickup lines. This is all Photoshop. This is what their experience looked like, It's a really cool way to kind of think about, like, what's the right branding, the right message for this audience. And sometimes there are brands that you wouldn't think about as, like, being extremely social, but they've gotten very good at it. Behr Paint. I know we have some folks that work in the paint industry here. Behr Paint has an app called Color Smart. It's pretty cool, right? If you're out in the wild and let's say you love this off-brick color. I don't know if that's how you describe a color, but say you like this and you want it in your home, you take a picture, and the app will automatically match it up to their paint palettes. It's very cool, it just needs a little bit more awareness. So how do you get it out there more? Well, you do 11 beautiful color and palettes inspired by nature, and underneath each one, we're breaking it down using the app. Again, it's about the product attribute, it's about the KPI, it's about what's important. So that was a really long-winded way. I hope I answered your question. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you again for having me. This was a lot of fun.